Hey, Dr. Salem.
Hey, Dr. Amos, great to see you tonight. How's everything going over there?
Very good, very good. We were having a fight in our house about what we're gonna eat tonight, so been the big argument tonight.
Who went out and what did you guys choose?
I don't think anyone won. I think it was Chick-fil-A or it was gonna like pizza and stuff like that. So it was me. Like I said, no one really won yet. So
All right, fair enough. Well, I think definitely we're curious about speaking of this kind of going back and forth. We're going to talk about something that's very relevant to our world tonight, which is going back and forth, which is this executive order. And I know we've been talking a lot about it, and I know a lot of our patients are very interested in understanding what's going on, getting some opinions. So I'm really excited to talk about this one tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you remember a while back when we had Dr. Allison Rogers on, fantastic show. We talked a little bit about this and, what might happen. None of us knew if it would actually happen. I mean, I think the big question is, like right as soon as the EO came out, people were calling us up and went, hey, do we have to pay now that it's all free? And, and I had to break it to them like, well, no, it didn't make it free yet. And so I think a lot of people were confused. I was confused, to be honest. It took me a lot of research to learn about this. And I spent hours and hours actually trying to understand, like, what is it that this EO does? And so, I think that's why the title is perfect for tonight is it a breakthrough or is it, bullshit? And I think it's a little bit of both, and I think that's what would be fun to talk to people and what they think about it. But I'm still very happy that at least it's in the conversation, right? And so it was interesting. I did podcast on this topic last night, and the thing I was talking about was, and this is the part that's shocking to just show you how far we've come, is that in the 70s, we used to actually have a law that prevented any federal funding to go to IVF. So, I mean, it just shows you like, we're not that, I mean, it's not like 100 years later, right? We're like 50 years later and we're talking now about making it potentially free for everyone. And that's what both promised on the trail. And I don't know if that's going to be possible, but it'd be really fun to talk about that tonight. And I'd love to see what questions they have. And I can go from there. But what are your thoughts? I mean, just personal thoughts on it. And then, I'd love to hear yours. I'll be honest, I'm pretty pissed. I think it's I'm hoping that this is going to turn to something, but love to hear what you think.
Yeah. And by the way, we'd love to hear what, any and all viewers are thinking about this too. Like weigh in on social media, just like weigh in, tell us if you think is this a breakthrough or is this BS? And we'd love to kind of just get a sense from our own patients, from kind of everywhere.
Everyone
thinking, yeah. And come onto the show, talk about why you think, it's one way or the other.
We won't yell at you, that's for sure. We're not mean people.
No. I mean, we don't know what the answer is, so it's going to make it pretty easy.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, this is one of these things that is definitely, I think we should go back for a second and just think about two things that you and I very, very much agree on. The first is that for infertility and fertility disorders are a disease and they should be seen as such. I mean, we, treat people every single day with this, and we don't ever look at this as like, oh, this is some elective thing, or this is something you chose to do, or you wanted to have low egg counts, or you wanted, you waited too long. No, this is part of like, a disease process. Nobody says, oh, you've lived for too long, so cancer is normal. Like, no, we treat it as a disease. So it's the same exact thing with fertility. I really believe that it needs to be treated as such. And that's been one of the biggest hurdles historically with expanding access to fertility treatment. Now, the other thing has been this weird thing that happened in our world, because it was sort of carved out by a lot of the insurance companies. They were like, nope, we're not going to cover that if there wasn't a mandate in the state or something. And I think what happened over time, just like things happen in a free market economy is somebody came in and answered the call to address this, and that was like in large part fertility benefits.
Yeah.
And employer-based solutions for fertility benefits, mandates in certain states have also come in. So I think we're definitely seeing over the last couple decades a lot of movement in the right direction, but it's been kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I think it really is, is the BS. I think I was quite disappointed when someone told me you made the executive order. As you know, I sent you a text a little too premature and said, "Hey, it looks like you might owe me a steak," and because someone said, "Hey, he did do it." But the thing is, he really didn't. But and this is like I said, I wanted him to just right away go, "Hey, we're gonna make our military have free coverage. We're gonna make our federal workers have free coverage," and that's what I thought was going to happen. Now, I took time to look at it and just go like, well, what's good about it? So one of the things I was happy about is it's only 90 days they're given to figure out something to do. So although I feel like it's bullcrap and that they're just kicking the can down the road, the question is what's going to happen in 90 days, which is about 70 something days from now. But again, it did nothing right now, right? So I'm happy that we're talking about it. But the question is, like I said, why didn't they just do it? And so I think one thing that's really important for everybody to know is there is no way any president can make an order that would affect us as private citizens. The only way that could happen is with an act of Congress. And so kind of like with when Obama had the ACA, he went and made certain policies that all insurance had to have. So there was things like, you had to have, you couldn't have exclusions anymore. And that's really, like you said, it's an exclusion. Like, how is it not considered a disease? How is it that the guy can not get an erection and we can, give him medication for erection, but if a woman can't, let's say has infertility because of her ovulation, that causes infertility. It really is an exclusion issue. And that's really what it's going to have to be Congress, that really does this.
Right. I was hoping we could talk a little bit also like about the context of all this today, because I feel like the current state of our system, it really, might really help a lot of our viewers, a lot of our patients just kind of understand, where we're at today and where we're trying to get to, presumably with an executive order that, mirrors what President Trump wants to do. And talk a little bit about maybe some myths and myth busting around fertility coverage. And if this were to go into sort of full effect, what that might look like, just to speculate. But I mean, I just wanted to take 2 seconds to just talk about like our current system, and talk about, I think probably the biggest difference across the country is mandated states versus non-mandated states.
Yeah.
And the difference there, of course, is that in mandated states, and those are a small subset, IVF coverage to some extent, or fertility treatment coverage to some extent, needs to be covered by major medical. Now, there are all kinds of exclusions, carve-outs. If your company's below 10 people, you don't need to do it, yada, yada, yada. Okay. But big picture, mandated state fertility coverage exists. So in the non-mandated states, then that leaves pretty much everybody else with, they're either covered by their insurance, which usually doesn't have a fertility benefit built into it, but some do now. So some, let's call them premium health insurances have that. And then the extra layer to all of this are sort of the fertility benefits providers. And these are this group of, growing and emerging fertility benefits like add-ons that your employer might choose to pay into. So you have IVF coverage kind of at that, probably top echelon of coverage. That's like, the Progenies, the Mavens, the Carrots, things like that. And those are generally, very good if you have them. You have really robust coverage. Now, what else, I guess, from your perspective, is that how you see the state of the system, or like, how do you see the state of the system right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one person said best in one of the Instagram posts is she said, it feels mostly like BS, she says, but was hoping it could push forward states with infertility bills that have been lagging. She mentioned that it's not helping the Washington State Building Family Act. So, by the way, if you guys please let us know. I mean, call in, let us know. We don't know every single state, but exactly what you said. I mean, we talked about this on the private side. The only way Congress can make it available is by removing exclusion, right? I think the prodigies and stuff like that, they're great, right? They're given onto the private side. The problem with them are they're usually only in very high paying jobs, right? And so a lot of us are not going to be able to have that. I mean, and we see that. We still see lots of patients who are cash only. One of the ways they could do it, and I know that this is so. Again, like I spent hours looking into the CEO because I had to do that podcast. And what was interesting is one of the things they're looking at is even making it where it's easier to do IVF. So they're actually looking on the clinic side and going, hey, like, how much red tape do we have on the clinic side? Is there a way we can maybe get rid of that to bring the cost down? And then the second part was they were looking at things like maybe even tax credits, right? So anyone that does IVF, it's 100%, deductible, right? So there are ways to do it that doesn't always require insurances to do it. And it's interesting, as a country, I think it's actually very important for us. I mean, we need to have babies born. And so, why not have the people who want to have babies, have babies born? So one thing I think that, I don't know, when I was doing this all last night was, and I'm interested in what people think is, what is their thoughts like on, is it better to have a tax credit? Would it be better for them to just have it free? Because I don't know, like I said, I think if people were okay with tax credit, I think it would actually happen a lot faster.
Yeah.
That's always a lot easier than just making it free for everyone.
Right. Well, let's talk about, I mean, very loosely, let's talk about a couple of these scenarios, because I think it's interesting to just kind of think about what other countries do and what it looks like there, and what ends up happening. So I think, in certain countries, like for example, in the UK, IVF coverage, if you qualify, is largely free. But the way it works there is that you effectively have to get on a wait list for your IVF, and it is rationed, and they're okay with that. It is straight up rationed. So you could run out of, that district's, I forget how they compartmentalize it, but that district's sort of IVF amount that they can do, you could run out of it by August, and then there's effectively no more new IVF patients, at that for the rest of the year. And then what happens is the patients actually end up transferring over to a private system that works in parallel, and then they pay out of pocket. So that's one place where like it's pretty much free if you qualify for it.
Yeah.
But there's this problem of rationing. Then there are other places where it's kind of like pretty heavily subsidized. There's some other European countries that we can think of where you have, let's call them like co-pays, or you have co-insurance that you have to pay a part of it. The difference is IVF looks very different there, right? You might meet your doctor one time, and they, because they have to see so many people, you have to kind of sort of be okay with that. It doesn't have this hyper customized, hyper personalized approach. There are other systems where it is fully cash pay, which is not the case in the US, it's not fully cash pay. And they do very, very small numbers of IVF that has its own limitations, right? And it's very, very expensive. I am curious though, since you were talking about it, like I do think a tax credit that is inclusive of sort of everybody who would want to access fertility benefits, with this general idea that, it should be equitable and everybody should have access to it and everything, would make a lot of sense as a starting point. I mean, obviously that's only going to knock off a small portion off of your total IVF bill or your fertility bill, but it's meaningful. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we already have tax deductions, for medical stuff. And so, it just, to me, it seems very easy to do. I actually went and calculated, again, purely just looking at like, okay, how many women are in the United States? How many women would be of child productive age, and said, like, what would it cost us to actually give free IVF to everyone? And what was interesting was it ended up not being as much as I thought it'd be. I mean, don't get me wrong, 120 billion sounds like a lot of money, but but that was about it. And I was assuming like most clinics are charging $20,000. I was thinking, stuff like that. You look at a clinic like us, right? You could even get more. And so I think one of the things that you see happen is whenever it becomes less costly, the volume goes up, right? And so that's the thing, is where there's a cap at and things like that. You were mentioning other countries, so like Israel, for example, fertility is covered there, but it's two kids. That's it. So it's capped at 2. Once you have 2 kids, that's it. There's no more. If you want more than 2 kids, you can't. I find it interesting. I'm sure you saw this a lot in Minnesota as well, but like a lot of Canadians come down from Canada where it's covered as well, and they do it. And that's sometimes it's because they don't want to wait. Other times because I've already had more than a certain amount of kids, as you said, ration. And then the other thing is for gender selection. I saw someone comment about that. They think, well, will potentially they leave it to the states. I don't think this is one of those issues they'll leave to the states. I really think this is one where, kind of like the ACA, where when Obama did that, there was a concern that if you left it to the states, it was too important, to leave the states. I feel like this one, there actually is a benefit to our country. I mean, having babies is something we need. We actually have a very, our reproductive rate's going down. So I do believe that at least when I say believe, I mean, I'm hopeful, that it won't leave the states, because I would be very worried about some states not covering. So I hope it is like the ACA does that. But then someone brought up a point about, and this is the thing I was talking about last night is, we really do have a very non-bipartisan, Congress right now. And so the problem is that they don't work together. And that's what worries me sometimes. I'm like, wow, like, are we ever going to be able to get this through? And it was interesting. I was looking at the different bills I've gone through. And so, like, for example, the Democrats tried to pass a bill, I think it was in 2023, I believe it was, to, make IVF accessible and stuff like that. And, I think conservatives thought it was a little too liberal. And so they all the, GOP said no to it. Then the GOP decided, okay, in 2024, we're going to make our own bill. They went and did one. That one wasn't enough. It definitely wasn't. It was more about preventing states like Alabama, from passing personhood laws. And so it didn't do much. And so they're like, we're not going to vote for this. There's not enough in it. And then it had to be a loophole. So it's interesting, like, what's going to bring them all to the table? And this is a very popular topic. Right. This isn't like 50% of the country things. Lots of people think this is something that's important. I don't know how it's going. What I do think is going to happen, though, is I think it's going to change the way we do IVF. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that they were talking about in the executive order was this idea of making it more affordable, but not by making the clinics make it more affordable, but how do we even change it? In other words, like, do we make it where everyone by a certain age needs to do something, and then at that point, like, they have to go to their OB, and then the OB does treatment there first, and then if it's not the OB, then it goes, like, not having where it's just everything's at the fertility clinic. So when we talk about things like the IVF clinics doing just IVF, maybe these smaller clinics, like even OBGYNs, might do minimal IVF, like very, very small amount, mini IVFs and things like that. And so it's just interesting what they're trying to look for. My question is, and I think this is a very fair question to ask, I'm not trying to put all the other clinics on the spot here, is how is it we're able to do it for so much less, still have the same rates, and other clinics charge 3 times the amount? And I think that's the real question. And I think that's something they're going to be looking into is it really that expensive? Or is it just that we in this country, people are being taken advantage of? Because we all know, again, I'm not trying to call out the pharmacies and all, but you can go and buy Menopur here in the States and you're paying $90. But if you go to, Europe, mm-hmm. and many people know about many websites you can get the meds, you get it for a third the cost. Right. And I've even brought this up to the companies. I'm like, hey, why is it so much more expensive here? And they're like, well, the quality and stuff. And I said, well, so you're giving crappy meds to other countries? And they're like, well, no, it's the same meds. I'm like, So why is it 3 times more expensive? And that's just for the name brands. You go to generics like some of these other countries do. That's the thing I think they're going to find out in this EO when they make this thing. It's like, wow, like, is it just a lot of doctors wanting, to be rich, or is it really that it's this expensive? And I mean, it's not cheap, no question about it. No one's going to ever get IVF for $200. But it's not as expensive as people think. And
Right.
that's the thing I think
it doesn't have to be as expensive as it is in many places.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, what you're talking about has the kind of an extra layer of complexity too, because is it that it doesn't need to be as expensive as it currently is across the board with the national, cost of fertility services, in my opinion, and yours being far too high? Or is it that maybe there has been over time a built-in inefficiency to the whole process? And, obviously we're not going to answer that question tonight, but it is an interesting question. And I think that's going to definitely be something that, many experts, policy experts, et cetera, really start kind of scrutinizing this type of thing as they're going through it. One thing that I did also kind of want to just bring up for a second was that, in many places where we do see the, higher volume going through at the national level, at least broadly speaking, when you look at national data, you do see that there's a little bit of a difference in success rates.
Yeah.
For example, Japan and a few countries in Europe, et cetera, their doctors are excellent. Everybody's trying really hard, but at the end of the day, the live birth rates per embryo transferred or the live birth rates per retrieval are a little bit lower. And there's I don't think it's that the patient is much different, let's call it, or something like that. But I do think that the system has different limitations there. And I do think that once you start having to deal with distributing like a limited resource, like an IVF care across a broad population, I do expect that the success rates may go down a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about this earlier about like other countries, right? And you might not see the doctor, right? You may you might have lower pregnancy rates because their equipment, although they're doing the best they can, right? There is definitely quality, between different equipment, right? So when using a large incubator like a hair cell versus using benchtop incubators, there's going to be differences. Having certified gases versus just regular gas. So what I think is that I do agree with you that like there's more volume, like you would think, and the quality goes down a little bit, there might be lower pregnancy rate. But on the same token, you might have people who are getting to IVF a little sooner and maybe who couldn't afford it before.
Yeah.
And so we're also going to have, because I mean, right now, I mean, honestly, like we see some tough cases. I mean, in one of the chats, someone was talking about, they have like stage 4 endo, and diminished ovarian reserve. And like in that situation, they said in their state, there's only 2 or 3 fertility clinics and they're charging 26,000. And they only get one shot at that, right? And so the way we do that is we give them tons of meds. We try to force as many as we can. We try to make it the best one cycle because we know most people aren't going to be able to afford a second cycle. And so you're kind of right that if we're doing it through the freeway, we're going to be doing these smaller, minier cycles. You're not going to probably push them as hard. They're probably not going to make as many eggs. But the pregnancy rate cumulatively will go up. It's just that the per cycle rate will go down. But I think people will change and understand that, right? Like, I mean, they'll say like, listen, yeah, we get it. The pregnancy rate per person is going to go down, but the actual transfer rate should not go down. Right. That should stay the same. And if people go through more time, then they'll have more embryos to use that are viable. And actually the pregnancy rate should stay the same or maybe even go up. So
Right. I wanted to bring up a little quick thing, super quickly. The ASRM, of course, they distribute a lot of policy information. ASRM is the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. It is kind of like our overseeing body that does, assisted reproduction in the U.S. and it's internationally, recognized, acclaimed, and they have a lot of policy experts that work for them too. And they did distribute like a fact sheet, and they made 4 high-level recommendations. I just thought I'd put them out really quickly. The first was make meaningful, measurable, substantive differences in expanding access to IVF treatment. Okay, I think pretty much everybody agrees with that. Inclusive of all patients who need care. So that would include, all individuals, all couples, everybody who's trying effectively to undergo any type of fertility treatment. Ensure that decisions about medical care are made by patients and physicians, and that the decisions are not made by bureaucrats, politicians, or insurance companies. This one's interesting for many reasons, but one of which is that, unfortunately, this doesn't even happen now. I mean, there are some medical decisions that are made by their insurance companies. Yeah. And then the last one is ensure the care delivered meets modern standards of care and welcome carefully evaluated innovations. What do you think of those? I mean, broadly, is there something that jumps out at you that
This is the ASRM post. I haven't seen this.
Yeah, this is the ASRM. They posted it just very recently in response to the executive order. This was their IVF policy priorities, they called it.
Gotcha. The one thing I can say about ASRM is that I was a little disappointed on them that when he made the executive order, I thought what they should do is give a big old finger like this and say, you promise free IVF and all you give us is this, some lip talk. So I was kind of a little disappointed when they're like, it's like a good first step. And it's like, you promised free IVF and you didn't even give it to the military right away. So I haven't seen that. I mean, I think it's great that they're giving. I think 3 of those are, as you said, just pretty much common sense. Yeah. And then the last one you said about high quality, I thought was, and innovation is a good idea.
Yeah. So. Here's I'm right there with you. I think we totally see I'm pissed off. I mean, I'm kind of like, come on, do a little more, push the issue a little bit more, Yeah. I mean, I think these are good things. They're very fluffy. They're very nice, but it's the same way that the executive order is. It's just it's like, we're going to look into it, and it really doesn't get at anything. I think if there's one piece here that I'm kind of like, okay, let's really make sure that if there's some legislation that goes through, we really want to make sure that fertility treatment, whatever it looks like, is a decision made between the patient and their physician. And in other places, in other countries, in other systems, we've seen the government really intervene. And as a result, some places cannot do genetic testing on the embryo. Some places cannot do sex selection. Some places cannot do double embryo transfer under any circumstance. So again, it's one of these things where there's a lot of nuance in our field. And I just hope that, we allow the patient and the physician to continue that shared decision-making that's brought us all the way to this point today,
Yeah. One thing I'd like to ask, and I really want the viewers, I really hope one of you can come on and talk to us about this. But like I said, I mean, I'm not just trying to rag on the president on this. It's just you sit there on day one, you stop the border, and yet you can't do anything for IVF. Now we just can look into it, right? So it's just, to me, like it's not enough. But let's take aside free IVF from let's say the government. What do people think of the idea? And you and I have talked about this a few times. This idea of what if instead of us making IVF free, or like even our own clinic, we said, what if we offered like another version? So it is very limited with doctors. So you're like, hey, you just need IVF. And, we're still customizing it. The doctors still make it. But what if we just made it where we said, listen, you're never going to see the doctor except for 2 times. We're going to have a AI system that when they go to do your ultrasound, it will give us the exact measurements. So you don't have to worry about that. And we're able to get the cost down significantly. Like, what if we can get IVF down to like $3,000-$4,000? But again, we're able to do very high volume. And it's not going to be as good. It's not, I think there's some benefit when you and I talk to the doctor. I think patients like talking to us. But I wonder, I'd love people to come on and tell me, what do you think of that? What would you think of the idea that if clinics said, hey, we're going to make this other type of IVF. So in this IVF, you're really not getting much interaction. You're going to feel like you're in a cog in a machine, but we can make it very low cost. And I honestly think if people were okay with that, right now, it's so much different, right? Right now, if you don't call someone back in an hour, you know, and they're demanding like, oh, I'm leaving. And so I think it could be done, but the way we think of it has to be different. We'd have to say, you know, explain to them like, it's not the same thing. It's the same outcome. The chances would be the same.
Right.
It's just going to feel like you're in a cog in a wheel and you're just like, okay, I do this, I do that. But I wonder what people would think of that. I'd love for if anyone can come on and talk to us about that, what your thoughts would be. Like, is that crazy, or is that something that people would be okay with?
Yeah. Or I would also love to hear if somebody has felt that way going through IVF somewhere.
Yeah.
And you know, what the pros and cons of that may have been. I would love to hear that. I mean, I would say that for starters, I'd really miss getting to chat with everybody. I don't know. I'm kind of a chatter, and I like.
Well, someone asked, how do we come on? If you look at the very top of the and there's a banner.
Yes.
All you need to go is go to tinyurl.com/the SME show, and you'll be on live.
Yeah, please come on.
And you don't have to show your face. But keep in mind, if you can see my ugly face and Dr. Sim looks a little better than me, you're going to feel great in this crowd. You're dealing with zeros. You guys are going to be better. So
you're going to do really well in this crowd.
So there were a couple questions that came in. You know, I would, we can probably go over those. I know we have, I'd love to talk to Steve Rooks. He's actually there and we don't have anyone live right now. So I'd love to talk to him right now because he's from Canada. And so it'd be really great to have a Canadian here who can tell us, like, you know, what it's like. Because you and I are giving our view, but I mean, he's true Canadian. He knows the system there backwards and forward. So it'd be really great for some people. So let's get you on, Steve. And then after you, we're going to get Carolyn on.
Yeah, actually, the surprising thing about Canada, you might think of us as, you know, the socialist country up north that, you know, Trump likes to kick. But the reality is that on IVF, at least, only 2 provinces have coverage from the government, and actually a third will be doing it soon. Ontario is now funding 2 cycles, and what they do is they basically dictate the price to the clinics, and the clinics don't have to take it. They can just be pure private, but it's also to some degree fully funded, but it's at about I'd say 75% of the open market rate, but there's covered. Meds aren't covered unless you got it with the health plan. Quebec is the other province that has 1 cycle covered. And British Columbia soon will be having 1 cycle covered. The better way, and I say this for the U.S. as well too, is Manitoba, which is just east of Ontario, sorry, west of Ontario. They allow for tax credits up to $20,000 a year. You'd get a 40% tax credit. So that comes right off your taxes. Now, what they allow is that you can adjust, if you know you're going into treatment right away, you can put in a form through your payroll company to reduce your withholding taxes to reflect the fact that you're now about to start treatment. So you're effectively getting cash in hand on a weekly basis in order to cover that treatment up to 40% of whatever you're spending, up to $20,000 a year, and that covers everything. There's no bureaucracy about it. It's just managed. You just got the invoices, and there's no lifetime limit. So you could spend $20,000 every year for a long period of time, and you get 40% of that back. To me, that model is far better than having, as it is in Ontario, some government bureaucrat managing the system, slowing it all down, and making sure all the right. It's almost as bad as a payer in the U.S. So, you know, that's where I think, if they could go to implementing tax credits at the federal level, that would be a very fast way of enabling it.
That's what I thought too. The credit makes it so much easier. It's a lot easier to not spend money than that. Do you mind if I ask you, in Canada, like I was talking about?
Yeah.
When they did this to those clinics, are those patients treated like, I don't know what it's like in Canada for IVF, but here, like, you know, we're talking to every person. I mean, every day they see me.
They're not treated any differently, because the reality is, you know, the clinics realize that, you know, many of them will need a private cycle at the end. In fact, because it's constrained how many of those cycles you can do a year. The clinics have a wait list for those paid cycles. So often what will happen is a clinic will say, look, you can wait 6 months to get that free paid cycle, or you're going to probably need 2 cycles. So let's start a private pay cycle now, and then we'll hold you in the queue if and when you need that second cycle, and that'll be covered. So that's a way they kind of deal with it. So they want to treat the patients well, because they can be a patient paying private eventually, or earlier.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Steve, we're going to go on to some more questions, but did you have a question for us before we go on? I just thought it'd be great to get a Canadian perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight the point that you were making, is that countries like, Israel's probably the greatest example in the world. The government funds 3 babies, not just 3 cycles, but 3 babies.
Well, I thought it was 2 babies. Is it 3?
It's 3.
Okay, I was wrong on that.
And so they have by far the highest per capita IVF cycles in the world, but the quality sucks. And I've talked to a few docs, in the Israeli system. They said, it's an assembly line. The quality's not good. And so the best indicator now is Spain in the world has the highest number of babies born via ART. It's about 12% compared to 2.5% in the US. But they're about half the IVF cycle rate. So they have a much better quality, as you'd expect, IVRMA and all the good Spanish clinics. So they by far have the best system, I'd say, today in terms of enabling access and affordability, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
I always enjoy it.
You have a good one, Steve.
We'll see you.
So I think we got Carolyn here. I'd love to hear what she has to say.
Hi there.
Hey,
can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm at the park with my IVF twins right now. So
Very
you'll
nice.
excuse the background noise if you hear it.
Probably only enjoyment.
Right. So my question was, with the executive order, they outlined that they were going to cut red tape, and the IVF industry is notoriously unregulated. And so I was kind of curious what your thoughts were with regards to them saying additional regulation within the industry.
Yeah. Dr. Seb, you want to give your 2 cents on this?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I mean, the idea is that they're saying they're like they're putting forth that they would like to deregulate what's already a pretty deregulated industry. And so I appreciate that they say that, because much of medicine probably needs a little bit of help in reducing, barriers to care, reducing regulation. I don't know if our industry is going to benefit quite as much from that one point, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think when it comes to red tape, you hit the nail on the head there, Karen. There's not really a lot of oversight over us, and that's what you're talking about. But there are definitely rules. The FDA, very stringent requirements. We're treated like no different than if you take a liver and put it in someone and you put an embryo in someone. I mean, it really is regulated. And that comes with risk then, right? And that costs. You have to get specialized people to do things. Part of the deregulation I thought they were talking about was, and again, I could be wrong, was the regulation in the past where, like, for example, military people still can't do IVF. Not everyone can. So there's all these laws written in there. And so in 19, I think it was like 96 or 90, somewhere in the early 90s, they actually went and made another law to repeal some of the 1970s law, but didn't repeal it. It was just like a loophole that they can now treat fertility in the federal government. So I felt like that's what they were talking about, some of that stuff. And then also our labs are under a lot of scrutiny. So we do have like CAP, we have COLA, we have all these different organizations that make sure we're doing things right. And that costs money, right? And so it's interesting that we are regulated, but it's regulated by self, right? And so, and overall, I mean, pretty good job. There's also a lot of risk too. And so one of the things they're looking at is like, how much money, are they going to put like tort reform in fertility, right? So if they put tort reform in fertility, it makes the cost a little bit less. And so then, it can bring costs down. So there are ways still through bureaucracy that we can get the cost down a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't think any of these tariffs are going to help us. I think that's going to make it go up a little bit.
Yeah, what are your thoughts with regard to personhood amendments and how that could affect the IVF industry? I think that's probably one of my number one concerns right now with regard to IVF going away altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you heard me, the group we're most worried about, right, would be Republicans in that situation, right? Because I mean, I don't think Democrats are going to be worried about personhood law since they're usually on the side of abortions, right? So I don't think we have to worry about that. And the Republicans themselves actually tried to pass something in 2024. The problem is both these sides, they put so much junk into these bills that they can never agree on it. But if someone made a clean bill to stop any state from making a personhood law, I think that would pass in a second, just because that's the one thing that when it happened in Georgia, if it showed anyone, was within 1 week, it was fixed. So that's the one thing I think that across the country, like 97 to 98% agree an embryo shouldn't have personhood law. So it's a pretty easy one, I think, to pass, but unfortunately nothing goes through clean.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely a personhood. I mean, just to put it bluntly, a personhood amendment would completely devastate the IVF industry and devastate the dreams of many people hoping to have a child via IVF for a whole host of reasons. But the bigger picture is just like you're saying, Dr. Amos. I mean, I don't think we're going in that direction. If anything, I believe we're going in the direction of making sure that a personhood sort of law does not go into place. Now, again, the problem is, politicians being politicians and burying a lot of other stuff with the nugget of truth in there.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for the questions. We appreciate it. Those are great questions.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
So I see Alex and Ananda are in the background here. And they're showing their face. I love that people are showing their faces. I feel like no one ever wants to. So this is great.
Can you hear us?
You guys, we can hear you. What questions do you guys have for us?
Oh, we didn't come on with questions. We came on when you were asking the question of us of like, would we choose the option of utilizing AI if it meant that IVF cycle could be like $4,000 or something?
Well,
yeah, I noticed the comments are like everyone's like, no. They think the interaction's really good, but it's interesting people say that because as Steve Rooks came on and said, that sure the quality, but there's difference in qualities, like he talked about in Israel where things were free, but it's crappy IVF. You never see the doctor, and that's the thing, is that eventually the volume gets so high. Like, how do you get enough fertility doctors to cover it? And so I would hate, and this is the thing I didn't bring up earlier, but this is the thing Dr. Salem and I have talked about, is we wouldn't want to give poorer care, right? We would want to make sure there's a difference. We would say like, okay, here's the lower price, here's the higher price, because we don't want to give low. The care wouldn't change. The care would be the same. It's just it wouldn't be the one-on-one. And we've always thought about that, like for people who maybe still can't afford, like if we can make this ultra lower cost option for people, that's what we were talking about. But I can tell from everyone, like everyone's like, no. So I feel like no one liked that one.
I think it's hard because I think if it means that people who could not afford IVF at all, it's like their one shot to get it, then of course you want to have that option available to people. But like, yeah, I think also if you have like I don't think any IVF case is straightforward, but if it's like relatively straightforward, or it's worth 1 or 2 attempts at that lower cost to see if you're successful on an early attempt, great. But like someone like me with a very severe early or diminished ovarian failure, I knew that at the end of my attempts, I wanted to know that I went to the best clinic, had the best doctor, so that if I'm not successful, I know that I gave it my best possible shot. And that's with you, Dr. Amos. So it's like throughout this process, there's so many unknowns, there's so many confusions, so many questions. That's why I do think the interaction is so important, because it gives you the peace of mind at the end of the journey that you did the best you could. You did everything you could, no matter what the outcome is.
You're right. And here's what I would say about this. I'd love to hear what you think, Dr. Sim, about this. So I joke around with people all the time. I'm like, if you're 25 years old, you could go to like Bob's Backyard IVF And a matter of fact, I'm not trying to call it this clinic. There's a clinic in this country, very low cost, not just like right. And the nurses pretty much run the whole thing. You don't even know your doctor. You literally go into this clinic, and at the very end, you get your retrieval. I actually spoke to one of the doctors who worked there. He says, I don't even know who the patient is. I just go in there and do the retrieval. And for people who are young and just need IVF for something like maybe their tubes blocked or sperm, it works. And I wouldn't say it wouldn't. But you're right. Like, we do see a lot of complicated cases in our clinic. And so it does take a little bit more. You have to think, outside the box. And you're right. I think when it's that situation of you don't know if this is ever going to work, it's kind of nice to have someone there who can always answer the questions. And I don't think I would ever say people wouldn't answer the questions. I think it would just be more of not that one-on-one touch. But it's just an idea, because also we don't have the answer. I don't think Dr. Sam has the answer to how we're going to get 100% IVF accessibility. But I know we're trying. That's what him and I are doing, and we're hoping to get it there someday. Because the thing that you brought up is people with bad cases usually can't do it in one cycle.
Yeah.
And for them, it's not even about the lower cost. People talk about one cycle, but what if you have to do 3 cycles? What if you have to do 4 cycles? Then it's completely out of touch. You don't have $75,000. I mean, that's insane. And so that's where the lower cost really comes into play, is when you have those tougher cases that can't be done in one. So
it's such a catch-22, because I think in those cases, that's when you want the one-on-one with the doctor, because after failed cycle 2 or cycle 3 or cycle 4, that's where you have the most questions and concerns, and you want that one-on-one conversation about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's so important to remember in our field is that we learn so much about you as we're going through a cycle. We gather important data, we change your protocol, we change, maybe something that for somebody else was an extremely minor issue, for you needs to be addressed. So I do think there is like this incredible, asset in being able to, have one person that really sees all of it and ties it all together. I mean, but just like you're saying, Dr. Amos, I mean, I would love to do that for 1,000 people a year. I can't.
Yeah.
That, there's only so much bandwidth that, you can have, even in the best of systems. And I think when we're talking about is, not people who are outliers, let's say, but like what's the middle of the road approach, right? And I think that's a really hard one. I mean, I personally, one of the things I love most about our field is that we get to have this like one-on-one with our patients and spend a lot of time with them and get to know them and, see them graduate. And it would be really sad to me if we lost that. But I would also be happy for all the people who couldn't access IVF if that really made the difference. So it is a catch-22, just like you're saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I really enjoy, I mean, and anyone who's ever been a patient of mine knows how much, like, it's funny. I tell everyone, I go, oh yeah, I have this friend. They're like, oh, you have a friend? And I go, well, no, it's a patient, but I consider him like a friend. Like I love everyone I'm with, and I take it home with me. When they don't have success, I agree that would be hard. But on the same token, there's this part of me that wants everyone to be able to have it. And so I'm like, well, am I willing to give that up? What I can tell you is, and just to show you how hard it is even on doctors, I mentioned this clinic, and where one of my friends used to work there. And again, not gonna say anyone's name or anything like that, but he would tell me it was very hard for him. He goes, it's so hard. He goes, I don't even know these people. He goes, and it's hard, because you want to care about them. And like, he felt like he was like a piece of meat almost, like, he's just like, okay, you gotta go in there and do this. And it was hard for him because he never had that connection. He never built up a rapport. So I've never done it. We're not saying we're going to do that. I just was really curious because we've talked about it many times, like how could we get it to where it's really, really affordable? Like, and the one way is, unfortunately, I don't know if many of you guys know this, there is a huge shortage in fertility doctors. I mean, it's a real issue. You make this, if this becomes a national coverage, there's no way. There is not enough fertility doctors if it gets opened up to everyone to do it. It's going to be impossible. And people are trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. Do we train OBGYN to do this? Do we make it where you have less of the doctor? And it's a real problem. and it's going to be becoming a bigger problem if it does become mandated, which is a good problem to have. I like that problem. And clinics like ours, we're very efficient and we can see a lot of patients, but there is even a point where I don't know how many more we could see, if it's still us doing everything. And that's the hard part. And so we've talked about, question again for everyone who's listening, because I love all your answers. We've talked about stunts. What if we ended up doing something where, like, if we did something like that, we still send a video every day of like what we thought, what our thoughts were, kind of that thing. And then if people had questions, they could send questions, we'll answer them as again. But again, that same thing, our goal that we're looking at is how do we make it more accessible for more people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could work. Like, if it's not necessarily you doing the ultrasound, it's maybe like a skilled ultrasound tech, and then you review it and you send your thoughts on the ultrasound after reviewing it and stuff. Because I think ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of your decisions can be made by the ultrasound and the blood work. So if you can review ultrasounds and blood work with a higher capacity and then just send like asynchronous thoughts and questions and answers, that could totally work too.
Yeah, absolutely. Or any other questions you guys have for us?
Anything else, sister? No. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming on and giving us your view. We appreciate it. I was looking at a lot. I mean, what they said is pretty much what everyone said. Most people were saying that, they agree that they would rather have that one-on-one. But I mean, it's true. Like, there is going to be like a crisis of we do not have enough REI doctors. And what's even worse is that, a lot of these clinics are being bought up by these big corporations. Mm-hmm. And that's only going to make prices go up more because it's all about the dollar then, I don't know. Like I said, if there's ever a time we needed help in our industry, it is now. I'm hoping that EO comes through and that in 90 days, we can really stick it to the president and say, like, okay, now what?
Yeah. And then I owe you that steak because I think there's a few people here rooting for you.
I know they said, I hope he gets his steak from Dr. Salem.
I'm like, all right, like I'm taking you out to a nice steak. But here's the thing. It has to be substantive. It can't be just mashed potatoes on the side with this EO. It needs to be some real meat in it. And then the steak is on me.
Yeah, it does worry me a little bit because, like I said, what worried me is and what pissed me off the most about it. And again, I'm not even a Trump hater. I don't think he's the devil. I just, if he does something bad, I say he does something bad. He does something good, I go, it's good. But what pisses me off is that you go on the campaign trail, you say we're going to make it free, and there's things he could do now and he hasn't. And that worries me a little bit because I'm like, well, why did he do those and then do this other thing? Like, you can do both at the same time. I'm hoping he comes through. Maybe, everyone can, push this to him and tell him that, and reach out to your congressperson and tell them like, hey, like, we expect this promise to be made. You run on promises made, promises kept. Let's see this one kept. And this is one that will benefit us all as a country. And like I said, we'll deal with the repercussions of having too many patients in the future. Like I said, it's a good problem, I guess, to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring up a couple of these comments here. So we had some really great comments that people were making on Facebook. So just this one here, I'm biased, but I think the human interaction is extremely important in REI. I mean, this is something we were just talking about, and definitely we agree with you. Here's another one that's interesting. This is somebody who's talking about costs in California, and it would be great to cover infertility-related tests, like at least the diagnostics. And, interestingly, we do see a lot of major health insurance companies cover the diagnostics, but it's not everybody. I feel like this is a great start, a great point that you made, Janet. So I would personally love to see the diagnostics covered across the board, for everyone that has any health insurance.
I mean, that's just basic care. I mean, at that point, like it's a diagnostic of looking for medical problems. I mean, how many times have you had a patient working up for fertility and actually found other problems? I found cancers. I found endometrial cancer. I found people have prolactinomas. Like, you're right. I mean, it's just a typical medical visit should be covered.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring up this one as well, because I think this is really an interesting point. We were talking about it. And thanks, Kristen, for bringing this up. And Kristen says, I do think some offloading to OBGYNs could work. Like now PCPs and PAs can do pap smears and not just OBGYNs. And, you know, I agree with you. I think we should work collaboratively with our partners. And I think this is a little bit of a cultural shift, both for us as fertility doctors, but also for patients, you know. So, you know, I know a lot of phenomenal nurse practitioners and PAs who are very committed to fertility, and they learn, you know, they really, really commit themselves to learning and, you know, studying and really becoming very trained in fertility. And so I think that our teams need to continue growing. And, you know, just to use a really cheesy, you know, sports analogy, is this sort of like the REI becomes the coach or maybe the quarterback and is surrounded by a lot of really excellent players that help out in critical ways as well. I mean, you know, what do you think there, Dr. Amos?
I agree. I mean, you know, at our clinic, so we don't advertise this, and hopefully this doesn't get out too much because I don't want us getting flooded with stuff, but we actually are running something similar to what I was talking about that we're going to branch off, which is the IVC we do. And people aren't familiar with IVC. It's where you take the sperm and eggs, put them in a little baby pod, and then it goes in the vagina, and it cultures in there for 5 days. And most places did it wrong. Most places, when they did it, they treat it like a mini IVF. They were charging still $9,000, $10,000. We went and did it and said, listen, we're going to charge $3,000, and about basically lets everyone do a fresh IVF, you know, low stim, and the whole thing is run by a very talented nurse practitioner, by the way, who
has
is
excellent success rates.
Yeah, excellent success rates. And now I still do the retrieval because, you know, you can't have her doing the retrieval thing. But the point is, it's actually going very well. And they're still getting the one-on-one. I still am involved, but this is kind of, it's not Bob's backyard, IVF. But the point is, like, it's working right now, and people are happy with it. We haven't had anyone, you know, like, this is the worst, and we still just have the same care we do in the past. I mean, you know, if things are not going well, we fix it. But I definitely think that's the way to go. And I think that's what I was saying about, I think things are going to get moved around a little bit. I think there's one other area that's really important, and you and I definitely love this. And this is this idea of even getting the people before they have infertility. I think any woman, you know, early on, this should be tested. I think when you hit 25, check an AMH, you know, and it should be covered by insurance, just like we go and get, well, some of you might not, you're too young, but like a colonoscopy at 45. You know, these are screening tests. I mean, why not screen for it? Why not find these things out, right? Then when people want to have a baby, why not involve your doctor? I'm not saying that we have to be in your bedroom. I'm saying, why not we have a way where we tell them, hey, we're going to give you ovulation kits, and then we're not going to be there, but it will come to us on a computer, and then we'll say, hey, things are looking good. And if we notice after 3 months it's not going well, we can say to them, hey, you might want to come in. There could be a problem. Why do we have to wait till it gets so bad? Why do we have to wait till someone gets stage 4 endo? Like, this is the type of stuff that I think will really benefit. And it might then lessen the load later, because we all know that one of the reasons IVF is going up is because people are waiting longer to have kids too.
Yep.
And we're seeing people before. So I think there's a lot of room to that can benefit and change. And I think using APPs are going to help. And I think finding ways to make things more efficient. You know, one of the things that Steve Rooks said in the background, which is something we were actually looking at, we were looking at a thing called Cycle Clarity, which is that company that uses AI to look at ultrasounds. And although we think it's really amazing, the goal would be is in one sweep, they can look at your ovaries and across the clinic, everyone would have the exact same measurements. So you get that kind of, you know, perfect ultrasound. We didn't think it was perfect yet, but we're still looking at it. But yeah, I mean, those things are going to what bring things around. AI is going to bring things around. Automation is going to bring costs down. Right. All these things are going to, it's going to go more and it's going to less.
Yep. Someone
did bring up a question though, and I didn't get to see it, but they were saying something about the cost going up. And I missed this question they saw. They were saying something about, no, it was one of the ones they sent us, was in California, some of the costs went up. And did you see that one? I'm sorry, I don't mean to slow this down.
No, we were. It was just saying, as it is, IVF costs an arm and a leg in California.
Yeah. Oh yes, So,
Mhm.
what do you think? I mean, it doesn't cost a lot in California just because, like, you know, some of it is that's the bureaucracy there. I mean, right? I mean, there is definitely more red tape there. You were in California. Tell me what was it like? I mean, were there more rules or were there more issues you had to deal with being there than here?
Yeah, I mean, so the short answer is yes and no. I mean, some of the stuff is there are some more rules. There's a little bit more red tape that, sort of gets in the way. That's like, let's say that contributes 10% to the increased cost there. There's maybe another, 20% or whatever, just because the cost of living is definitely increased there. So, the rent's higher and, stuff's more expensive. But just as a reminder, they pay the same amount for the embryo media as we do. We get this, we get the same media that they do. And so we're paying the same exact thing. So those things aren't any more expensive there. I think one part of what may have happened in California is that there's a lot of demand and there's not enough supply. And that makes the price just slowly creep up and up. And clinics are like, well, how do I address all this demand? Well, I just bump my prices higher. And everybody's willing to pay more and more and more. But unfortunately, one of the most sad things about working in that system is some of the people that need it the most have been priced out, totally priced out. They're like, what do you mean? It's going to cost how much to do just one IVF cycle? And as a result, I think there's a statistic that for every 5 people that need IVF in California, only 1 can access it.
Wow.
So 4 out of 5 people are left on the sidelines because they don't have the insurance to pay for it. They don't have the money to pay for it. And that's a big number. I mean, that's a really, really big number. And that's really sad. And I think as a doctor, all of us, I can remember talking to just about every doctor in California, and they thought the same thing. They were like, I just feel really sad when patients, walk away from something I know I can treat. And I hope that's part of what we're all able to fix as a group of doctors in fertility.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping what we can do is in about 70-something days now, when that EO is done and they give their info, we can come back and talk about this and see, is it more bullcrap or is it actually now, some substantive change that's going to happen? I'm really open. So, and I pray for everyone that does. And I think there's still always going to be places for our clinic because like we've talked about, it doesn't matter even there's a mandate. It can't give everyone it unless it goes to like Medicaid and things like that, for everyone to have it. But I hope it does have some substantive change.
Yeah. I definitely hope to be, a part of this field with you, so that everybody who wants to build their family, however that family might look like, to have a chance to do that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. And I appreciate the people who came on. That was so awesome. I really love when people come on and great questions here. I mean, like I said, this is a really interesting topic. Let's all cross our fingers that one, I get my steak from Dr. Salem, which means that then they have made changes to make IVF more affordable or, as promised, free.
Yeah.
You have a good one. See you
Take
later,
care.
Salem.
We'll see you later. Bye.